So I have to, I just feel like I brought up Cheney. You know, there are a lot of bad people in the world. I don't think Cheney's the worst person in the world in the running, but I could think of others. But I don't want that event, the Cheney endorsement, the family endorsement of Kamala Harris, of all people, to pass by without examining its significance. This feels like, if historians were honest, this is an event that they would write about 50 years from now, when the actual architecture of the world became clear to everybody. This is what's really going on. This is how it really works. But I'll stop and ask you what you think of it.
I have a very simple message for my Democrat friends, my independent friends, those who may not be sure about who they're voting for in this election. Dick Cheney has just made the choice very clear. A vote for Kamala Harris is a vote for Dick Cheney, the architect of everything that has gone wrong in the Middle East for the last few decades. And so it's interesting because if you listen to the New York Times or some of the other mainstream media, they're saying, oh, you know, don't expect much from Kamala Harris in the way of policies and details and plans, and we're not going to know much about what kind of president she's going to be because she doesn't have much time. They're conveniently ignoring the fact that she's been there working in the White House the last 3.5 years alongside Joe Biden. She's been the last one in the room, according to her, as these big decisions are being made. But we look at who she says, her response to the Dick Cheney announcement today was that she was honored to have his endorsement. And we got military veterans in the House. Got a lot of you who probably served in the Middle East like I did. And so it sickened me, Tucker, to read those words today, both from Dick Cheney, Liz Cheney, and Kamala Harris, because we have people who we care very much about who were killed in those wars because of Dick Cheney. Kamala Harris has told us all we need to know about what kind of commander-in-chief she would be. And I don't know about you, but I would not trust her for a moment with the lives of my brothers and sisters in uniform.
We did not start this campaign. I did not put in tens of millions of dollars to be a spoiler candidate. I put in tens of millions of dollars to win, to fix this country, to do the right thing. I will say that Clear Choice, this PAC, this DNC-aligned PAC that was created specifically to take us out, has spent millions of dollars to take us out. They have unfortunately turned us into a spoiler. And we don't want to be a spoiler. We wanted to win. We wanted a fair shot. The DNC made that impossible for us. They have banned us, shadow banned us, kept us off stages, manipulated polls, used lawfare against us, sued us in every possible state. They've even planted insiders into our campaign to disrupt it and to create actual legal issues for us. I mean, the extent by which the sabotage they've unleashed upon us, it's mind-blowing. I mean, we're still learning new ways that they have sabotaged us. I really wanted a fair shot at this election, and I believed in the America that a little girl, pledged an allegiance to. And that is not where we are today, and it's not because of the Republican Party taking us out. It is exclusively because of the Democratic Party taking us out. And I am so disappointed I ever helped them. I am so disappointed that I helped Chuck Schumer in that Georgia runoff secure a majority. It's probably one of the biggest mistakes of my life. And it's really devastating. So to answer your question, we are not spoilers. That was never our motivation. We really wanted a fair shot. I think had we had a fair shot, we would have won. I still would love to see in the last 80 days of this election some miracle play out where we get a chance to debate I don't think they're going to let us. And, given this, I think we are taking a very serious look at making sure that the people that have corrupted our fair and free democracy do not end up in office in November. It's hard. I mean, it's really hard, Tom, to say these words because it's also acknowledging how bad things are.
You said, what are the odds that Joe Biden has a debilitating event between now and November, including death? So he runs a 1 in 20 chance of dying in any given year or above, that I don't think you know whether he's even going to make it to November. Debilitating event could have been a debilitating public event.
I purposely left it vague, and I didn't say the other part of it, which I now feel comfortable saying, which is I don't know whether Donald Trump will be allowed to become president.
What do you mean by that?
I think that there's a remarkable story, and we're in a funny game, which is, are we allowed to say what that story is? Because to say it, to analyze it, to name it, is to bring it into view. I think we don't understand why the censorship is behaving the way it is. We don't understand why it's in the shadows. We don't understand why our news is acting in a bizarre fashion. So let's just set the stage, given that that was in February. There is something that I think Mike Benz has just referred to as the rules-based international order. It's an interlocking series of agreements, tacit understandings, explicit understandings, clandestine understandings about how the most important structures keep the world free of war and keep markets open. And there has been a system in place, whether understood explicitly or behind the scenes or implicitly, that says that the purpose of the two American parties is to prune the field of populist candidates so that whatever two candidates exist in a face-off are both acceptable to that world order. So what you're trying to do from the point of view, let's take it from the point of view of, let's say, the State Department, the intelligence community, the Defense Department, and major corporations that have to do with international issues, from arms trade to, food. They have a series of agreements that are fragile and could be overturned if a president entered the Oval Office who didn't agree with them, and the mood of the country was, why do we pay taxes into these structures? Why are we hamstrung? Why aren't we a free people? So what the two parties would do is that they would run primaries. You'd have populist candidates, and you'd pre-commit the populist candidates to support the candidates who won the primaries. As long as that took place and you had two candidates that were both acceptable to the international order, that is, that they aren't going to rethink NAFTA or NATO or what have you, we called that democracy. And so democracy was the illusion of choice, what's called magician's choice, where the choice is not actually, pick a card, any card, but somehow the magician makes sure that the card that you pick is the one that he knows. In that situation, you have magician's choice in the primaries, and then you'd have the duopoly field two candidates, either of which was acceptable, and you could actually afford to hold an election. And the populace would vote, and that way the international order wasn't put at risk every 4 years, because you can't have alliances that are subject to the whim of the people in plebiscites. So under that structure, everything was going fine until 2016. And then the first candidate ever to not hold any position in the military nor position in government in the history of the Republic to enter the Oval Office, Donald Trump, broke through the primary structure. So then there was a full court press. Okay, we only have one candidate that's acceptable to the international order. Donald Trump will be under constant pressure that he's a loser, he's a wild man, he's an idiot, and he's under the control of the Russians. And then he was going to be a 20-1 underdog. And then he wins. And there was no precedent for this. they learned their lesson. You cannot afford to have candidates who are not acceptable to the international order and continue to have these alliances. This is an unsolved problem. So I don't have a particular dog in this fight. I, one, believe in democracy. I also believe in international agreements. And it is the job of the State Department, the intelligence community, and the Defense Department to bring this problem in front of the American people and say, we have a problem. You don't know everything that's going on. And if you start voting in populist candidates, you're going to end up knocking out load-bearing walls that you don't understand.
But Trump was in office for 4 years. Did he turn the entire table upside down?
He risked doing that.
Say more.
You remember that there was this uncomfortable accommodation given to the Central Intelligence Agency at the beginning of his actual term. There was a question about, was he going to question I have a very different point of view than most of my friends who are also, at least nominally Democrats, which is it was a very immoral thing that was done to him. He was asked the question, will you pre-commit that you will accept the results of an election? Now, if you were going to rig an election, you would ask somebody that to begin with, and that's part of the game. And he says, well, we'll see. So you have this very strange thing going on where democracy is the greatest threat to democracy. Now, how can that be? It's two different concepts of democracy. One concept of democracy is the will of the people. You hold plebiscites. And even if you do it with an electoral college or political parties, the idea is that the people are elected, by and of and for the people. The other idea of democracy is that democracy is about institutions that sprang from democracy once upon a time, and that those institutions have to be kept strong. Those are two completely different concepts that are overloaded to the same word. Under that circumstance, we have a paradox, which is how do we keep the electorate from overturning the type A democracy from overturning the type B democracy? And that's the unsolved problem that they will not bring in front of the people. So what you have is a situation in which I believe that there are many people in Washington, D.C. who think that Donald Trump cannot become president because he can now go for broke. He's also not going to try to run for re-election. He's relatively unconstrained. He's wealthy. He's learned how to play a lot of these games.
And maybe got a little bit of an axe to grind as well after the last 6 years.
No kidding. And he's a wild card. There are three people who are doing amazing versions of the drunken boxing game. Kanye, who's probably the first one to really fail, Elon, and Donald Trump. And all three of them tried to do something where you couldn't pin them down. You couldn't figure out what they were going to do next. And that's what the order keeps trying to do. Will you commit to this? Will you say this? Will you mouth these words? And none of these people would play the game. I find this all. You ever see Emmanuel Augustus, this boxer who actually, I think Floyd Mayweather said it was his toughest opponent because he wouldn't fight in a style that anyone could recognize. Probably the most
unpredictable.
And the most entertaining boxer I've ever seen in my life. I mean, just check out any highlight reel and you won't even believe this is real. It doesn't seem possible. So that's what Donald Trump is. He's a guy who's got formulas that confuse people like Sam Harris. Sam and I have been debating this for years. I think that Trump is an incredibly intelligent man and that there's incredible method in his tweets of old. You could put them into a data set and you say that there are 5 or 6 different types of tweets and that the left falls for every one of them every time. So in this situation, you have a question. How is it that Donald Trump and RFK Jr. cannot possibly reach the Oval Office and we have to have a candidate who is pre-subscribed to perpetuating these institutions, these agreements, and these orders? And there's only 1 out of 3 who has that character, and that person has not won a primary. Right now, we have no idea who's running the United States of America. I just came here in a Tesla, and I did not steer once. And I would say America is in full self-driving mode, and we don't know what the AI is that's running the Oval Office. And that's really bizarre, given that we have something like 6 minutes to make a decision about nuclear launches. We have no idea what the United States government in the executive branch actually is. But it can't be Joe Biden.
Every time it seems that an election has happened over the last decade or so, it's always been, this one is different. This is the most important. This is the most important. Is there something different about the one that we're about to go into? How should we think about this election?
As World War II unraveling, the order that has produced the illusion of peace for this length of time. Imagine that you were, let's say in the 2000s, that you had this thing called the Great Moderation. And there was a story that we had finally banished volatility from the markets. None of that was true. What you were doing was you were going farther and farther into a regime without understanding that sooner or later the Jenga tower has to collapse. The order that was put in place at the end of World War II, none of its architects are still alive. Very few pieces of information were passed down about what it actually is or how it functions because it's secret. And I think what you can say is that we are now living on the fumes built from that victory. That is what is unraveling. You're about to head towards a multipolar world where the game theory in a dyadic game of two players doesn't look remotely like the game theory in a 5 or 10 player game. So Kamala is essentially the youngest boomer possible, and she's tied to the last silent generation president we'll ever have, which was a bizarre thing to begin with. And she's pre-committed to trying to continue that order in the guise of a alternatively woke, Wall Street friendly, Indian black, folksy. I don't even know what she is. To quote the great Chris Williamson, she's a meme of a meme of a meme. That was from our last talk. And I would say this is probably the most insane election we've ever seen by a comfortable margin. I would say that there's no one in second place. I can't think of another election that is even close to this bizarre, including the attempted assassination on Donald Trump.
Yeah, there's so many things all coalescing at the same time, from what's happening with the media to AI to discontent to fake news and cheap fakes and constructed.
Sorry. Fake news was a fake story. If you look at the Google Trends, fake news was a tiny story during the 2016 cycle that blew up immediately afterwards. It was the placeholder as the intelligence community or the blob figured out what it was going to do next to try to take control of the international order. You have to realize that that's the first real surprise in presidential history where they lost control of the process.
Well, I've got a surprise for you. I told you not to watch this before we get to do this.
I actually listened.
Did you?
Well, it's weird.
I told you not to do it.
I know. It's like pouring sugar on a picnic to keep ants away.
Okay. So for the people who haven't seen it, we'll just do a quick recap.
MSNBC was exposed today for yet another set of lies. They deceptively edited together this video of different Joe Rogan comments to make it appear that he was singing the praises of Kamala Harris.
She's going to win. No, she's not. She can win. She is a strong woman. She is a person who served overseas twice. She in a medical unit. She was a congresswoman for 8 years.
Yeah.
She is a person of color. She's everything you want. She's going to win.
No, she's not.
She can win. They just want no Trump, no matter what.
What do you make of that? That's the most brazen cutting together of something that millions of people have seen.
They don't really, whatever it is not really trying to fool you. It's trying to instruct you. You're allowed to see the truth. They can make it difficult to find the truth, but it's hard to shut up Joe Rogan. They've settled for something else, which is, think about MSNBC and CNN, the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Los Angeles Times, Reuters, AP, etc., as a set of instructions for how to keep your job. You're allowed to disagree. We'll set the boundaries of the disagreement. We'll set the topics of the disagreement. You may not even watch any of these things, but we'll make sure that it filters through to the people that you are watching so that they're outraged. And you're given a choice. You can choose to understand whatever you want, and you can choose to say whatever you want. But if you say what you understand to be true, you can know what the consequences are. You may lose your marriage. You may lose your job. You may lose your friends. And so, in essence, we all know that if you question the war in Ukraine, or if you say, look, I detest Donald Trump, but I'm voting for him because what's going on in the Democratic Party is unholy and insane, you're signing up for whatever Thanksgiving dinner we have planned for you. We're talking to your uncle. We're talking to your spouse. And in essence, this is a lot like Caligula installing his horse as a senator. No one's fooled that the horse is an ordinary human senator. The choice is, do you wish to say something?
So he starts talking trash about the mainstream media and how corrupt it is. And they're playing this on pretty much everywhere. And then also, wait. Yeah. And then they turn down the audio. You can't hear what he's saying. He's calling out the corruption in media. And, you know, he's deciding to endorse Trump and talk about the stuff Trump's got going on the last 2 weeks. Which clip is this you got here, Rob?
This is where Bobby Kennedy is criticizing both the DNC and the media for covering up the DNC's corruption. And then CNN cuts away from it.
Go ahead and play the clip.
And their capacity to go toe-to-toe with any opponent in the battle over ideas. They would be astonished to learn of a Democratic Party presidential nominee who, like Vice President Harris, has not appeared in a single interview or an unscripted encounter with voters for 35 days.
We've been listening to independent candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr. from Phoenix outlining what led him to his quixotic quest for the White House to now dropping out.
The moment he's about to criticize
relinquishing the title of
Kamala, they do this. And but first of all, what do you think about his message and what he just talked about?
In this particular clip?
Just all of it, everything, because it was 45 minutes to an hour. It wasn't like it was a 5-minute announcement.
Yeah, it was classic Robert F. Kennedy Jr. You know, he has encyclopedic knowledge on a wide range of subjects, and he covered a great many of them. That clip is interesting, not only because of what he said. What he was effectively saying was that the presentation that we all receive is pure stagecraft, and he's right. And then to have CNN cut away, not able to engage in their usual level of stagecraft because they don't know what he's going to say is incredible. They validated exactly what it was he was describing, which was a fake world that's presented over our screens by these mega monolith corporations that decide what we get to know and when we get to know it. We are in a novel moment in American political history where many of us who hold different positions on the political spectrum, have different priorities with respect to policy, are finding that none of our differences matter in light of the jeopardy that the republic is in. And so what he is effectively doing here is he is saying those differences aren't going away, but they're just simply secondary. And he is both structurally, by withdrawing from certain ballots and not others, he is emboldening a movement that is more widely recognizing that those differences have to be put aside until the main job is done, and he's leaving himself an important voice in that discussion. So I was very interested in the way he navigated the idea. This was not a simple endorsement of Trump. This was an endorsement of retaking the White House and using that position to restore the republic to its proper course.
Do you have another clip here, Rob, that you prepared? Which one is this?
This is actually the clip you were just mentioning where he mentions Biden being used throughout the convention. Trump's name.
Let's hear
it. Instead of showing us her substance and character, the DNC and its media organs engineered a surge of popularity for Vice President Harris based upon, well, nothing. No policies, no interviews, no debates, only smoke and mirrors and balloons in a highly produced Chicago Circus. There in Chicago, a string of Democratic speakers mentioned Donald Trump 147 times just on the first day. Oh, who needs a policy when you have Trump to hate? In contrast, at the RNC convention, President Biden was mentioned only twice in 4 days.
That's crazy.
I do interviews every day. Instead of showing us her.
And that's 147 on the first day. Combined totals like 393 that he talks about. So, okay. So before even going into my follow-up question, prior to this announcement being made, were you in a place where you were an undecided voter, whether you're going to vote for Bobby, Kamala, or Trump? I'm talking yesterday.
Well, let's put it this way. I was not undecided with respect to what needs to happen and what the top priority is. I'm always undecided with respect to what the best use of my vote and my voice is at any given moment. I mean, it's what we call a question of opportunity cost. You have a certain number of cards to play. What's the best way to play them given where you are right now and what you know? So I'm still very much a Bobby Kennedy supporter. I think he's the right guy for the job. I have some issues in which I differ with him substantially, but overall, he's the person I want to see with the power because I think he gives us our best chance of getting where we're going. But that said, they very successfully put roadblocks in his way that made it very difficult for him to attain the office, and therefore, that does open the question of what exactly to do with my vote.
So that's why I think you're important. So a couple of weeks ago, the Trump-Rogan feud, right? Hey, Rogan said good things about RFK.
Yep.
And then Trump comes back and says, I wonder what the booze you're going to get when you get to UFC. Then Rogan posts a picture with him and who was a comedian that was Trump. And
Shane Gillis.
Shane Gillis. And says, hey, we made up, we're good. And that picture goes viral. And now 2 weeks later, RFK says this. Does he having a position or endorsing Trump, does this cause a guy like you to be open to the idea of voting for Trump versus Kamala?
Oh, absolutely. Let me just be perfectly clear about this. I think the modern Democratic Party is an existential threat to the Republic. And although I am a Democrat, I've been a Democrat my whole life, the party that I see in front of me today is literally the inverse of the party I signed up for. This is now the party of war. This is the party of racism. This is the party of censorship. I don't recognize this party. There is no conceivable scenario in which I would vote for Kamala Harris. I just simply will not do it. Am I open to voting for Trump? I am. I'm especially open to it if he is partnered with Bobby Kennedy, because what that tells me is that my values, which are a much closer match for Bobby's, are represented in that administration. And that's really what I want. I want a coalition to redefine American politics because, frankly, we have a long-standing problem with corruption, which has now turned into something else with the modern Democratic Party. But we need to rethink the way we govern ourselves so that corruption is not the dominant force. And a coalition is the way we're going to do that.
Yeah. So